Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, Chatting with ISO Experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Scott Dawson, President of Core Business Solutions, and Ann Siebert, Product Manager here at Core Business Solutions. Glad you both could be with us.
Glad to be here, X.
Yes, thanks, X.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you both. On this week's podcast, we're going to discuss the Core Compliance Platform and how it works with ISO standards. But before we begin, let's just hear a little bit from our guest, Ann and Scott. Ann, could you give us a little bit about yourself, what you do here and all that?
Sure. I am the product manager for the Core Compliance Platform. I've been with Core Business Solutions a little over 7 years at this point. Been working with the software team the last 4 or 5 years, trying to improve it and have the best experience for our users.
Awesome. Well, that's great. I know you've been here a little bit longer than I have, and you've had a couple of jobs, but this one seems to be where you've settled, which is great.
Yeah.
And Scott, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been working with Core for 24 years.
Ooh.
From the beginning. So, yeah, the company's 24 years old. The platform is 23 years old. Been revised many times over 23 years. Talk more about kind of the origin story, if you will, and what we're trying to really accomplish to help our clients simplify, ISO compliance.
That's great. Well, that is why we're here. So, Scott, we'll start with you, since you've been here the longest and as the mad scientist behind the Core Compliance Platform and the inception of it, really. Can you give us a little bit about how it started and also how you recognize the need for a software that's dedicated to managing ISO compliance?
Yeah, great question, X. So prior to founding Core, I was in quality management in a manufacturing environment. And that's where I first got introduced to ISO for the very first time. It felt like I was reading Greek or Hebrew,
which you would have been familiar
biblical
with.
studies.
Yes.
Another story for another day. But it was difficult to, understand what to do and difficult to just keep it simple enough that our business could operate. So I struggled through my first activities with ISO, first certification with ISO as a manager. So having gone through somewhat of a painful exercise, when we started Core Business Solutions, my brother and I, centered on the idea of there's got to be a simpler way for small companies to do this.
Right.
How can we make it more step by step to go through the ISO certification process and keep it up long term?
Right.
The other thing is, I know with small companies is the cost of all this is really, really important. So whatever product or service we provided to help with ISO had to be affordable enough that a small company could easily see that being a way forward for them.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was kind of the genesis of the whole concept of the business. It's still the concept for the business.
Right.
A lot of small companies depend on us to get certified and keep their certification.
Yeah. I mean, it's in our core values, customer focused. That's our first one.
Yeah, for sure. And so the need was and is making ISO as simple as it can be in a way that would suit how a small business should implement or could implement, yet not be cookie cutter. So that's when you push that idea to the extreme, you'd say, just give me some templates, I'll fill them out and show them to the auditor and we're done.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty simple. You just do that. But first of all, auditors catch on to that pretty quick. These aren't your documents. These were you found these somewhere or something.
Right.
And even today, you can go buy document templates. You could buy a package, download it for pretty cheap, a few $100, and you have quote unquote everything you need.
Right.
What we've found is that in order to not only make it simple, but make it sustainable for the long term, you got to think about it more from a system or process point of view.
Right.
How is this going to be continued to be maintained? Simplicity, sustainability, and then value add. So how can the company get something back? Not just the certificate,
right?
But how do they get something back in terms of, more efficiency in their company or quality improvement So how can ISO actually make a difference in their business?
And that continual improvement.
Yeah. So the part of it was can we automate much of the rigmarole? Mm-hmm. That's a technical word.
Rigmarole.
Yeah. But how do you automate that? And what can be or should be automated? And now, of course, you'd say put online. So we tried to automate as much of the process as we could, or much of the information that's needed as we could, much of the management of ISO as we could. Yet customers still needed help because they needed somebody to explain it to them.
Right.
So then it was, well, our business can't just be software because most small companies don't have a lot of experience with it. It's complicated, don't know where to start, all that. So you got to provide help along with the software. So that's where our consultants fit in.
Right.
So we've really custom fit a solution for small companies that's very efficient for the customer. I'll say very efficient for us. Needs to be to keep the cost down.
Yeah.
And break the cycle of what I call conventional consulting. So conventional consulting is still available. Somebody wants to buy it or rent it or whatever you do with it. But you can get a consultant who will come and spend as much time as you want, and they'll charge you for their time.
Right.
And that can get you certified. You easily can get certified. And you could have them return, a few times a year or at the end of the year and get you ready for the audit again.
Right.
That could be your maintenance plan. But most small companies can't afford those rates. These can be hundreds of dollars an hour.
Yeah.
Or $1,000 or more a day. It adds up awfully fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what are you left with? Well, you're left with dependency on the consultant to come back and do it again.
And whatever they're going to give you. And their availability.
Yeah. So we wanted to break that cycle and provide a product kind of an approach, a package, that's a better word, a package that was a combination of automation, online training, and help from an experienced consultant, and put those three kind of parts of a triangle together, and then make all of those as efficient for everybody as possible so that you can make the whole process as affordable as possible. And that combination for 24 years has really taken off. I mean, we work with hundreds of new companies every year. Come to us because we have this package.
Going to the software side, that's going to take some of that busy work
out of
that's
the only way it works. We could not operate efficiently like we do, or at scale, which has turned out to be needed because we've got, like I say, hundreds of new companies every year. We work through the process. If the software wasn't at the heart of it to help the customer and our consultant keep things on track, then it wouldn't work.
Right.
It wouldn't work. And the budget would get out of control. But it would be dependent on consultants' time.
Right.
And then it gets to be unaffordable. So the last piece of that is, by doing it this way, we can anticipate how much time it's going to take for the customer and how much time it's going to take for our consultant. We've done thousands of these projects. So we know going into every project, based on certain parameters for a customer, how much time is that going to take? We can then quote a fee to the customer on a firm fixed price basis.
Right.
And that way the customer can say, oh, this thing's only going to cost me $7,000 or $12,000, depending on the size of the company.
Right.
And it's guaranteed to work, which is what we do. Sign me up.
And is going to work as you continue on.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So it's a combination of things. The software was sketched out literally around a kitchen table on a napkin.
That's a great story.
I mean, literally.
How many small businesses do we work with that probably were the same thing?
The same kind of thing, or over a beer, right? That would be another way to do it. My brother and I are the owners, and we were at my parents' house over Christmas, and while we were having cake, we were sketching on a napkin with this idea.
Was there cake on the napkin? I'm sorry.
That was the napkin next to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, Mike had asked me the question, so if this were going to be simple, and if it was going to be on the computer, again, long before cloud-based stuff or software as a service and all this stuff kind of became into vogue, it was you'd install with an installation disk on your computer.
Right.
And that's how you ran software. But we knew the computer had to be a central part of this whole thing. So Mike just said, how would it work? If you had the perfect, simplest thing, how would it work? What would it do? And he grabbed a napkin and a pen and started drawing a database. I didn't quite know what he was writing down, but it was these little diagrams and sketches and things. And after we chatted for, I don't know, an hour maybe, he turned the napkin around and showed it to me and said, is that what you're talking about? And I looked at it and said, yep, that's it. And he said, well, do you want me to work on it? Yeah, work on that. Sounds great. How about the second piece of cake? You know, I mean, that's how the business plan, if you will, came about.
That's awesome.
I wish we had the napkin.
Yeah, you guys should have framed that
Actually,
instead of the first dollar.
Wish we had the cake.
It was good
but
cake.
The cake's gone. But it really came out of personal frustration and experience I had going through this process for the first time, being as confused as ever, taking 3 years or some ridiculous amount of time for us to do it, and stumbled and bumbled our way to certification. And it just stuck in my craw that it was so hard.
There's got to be a better way.
And then when we started talking about a business, we centered on this idea of it's got to be simpler. It's just got to be a simpler way to do this. And you could, at the time, you could buy software. There was all kinds of software, very complicated, lots of screens, lots of stuff. You had to have the installation discs, you know, all that. And you could hire a consultant by the hour. Usually those were 2 different providers. So the consultants didn't provide software and the software companies didn't have any consultants.
So now they have to learn it.
So if you're going to involve yourself with software, you had to learn it on your own. And then the consultant would come in and they'd want to do it different. Nothing was coordinated. So it made it more complicated, not less.
Well, this really does simplify maintaining compliance.
It simplifies. And Anne, in her role, working with the software team, has really carried on that vision for how do we simplify it even more? How do we keep it simple, especially as ISO changes? You know, it does change.
Right.
And we have to change with it, but still stay centered on that you know, vision, if you will, of simplifying ISO.
That's awesome. So, Anne, we get to hear that story again. I know we've heard it a few times, but it's really it's exciting because I think there's a lot of businesses that can relate to that start, you know, and relate to this. There's got to be some better way. This has to be better, and see that entrepreneurial kind of spirit. So since it was designed 23 years ago, it's gone through a lot of iterations, and you've been here for a while. Can you tell us at this point in Core's life, what are some features and functionalities of the software that really do address ISO compliance management?
Yeah, sure. There's actually several ISO standard requirements that can be handled by our AutoForm technology.
Okay.
Which is basically a electronic form template to gather your data.
So these are going to help with the actual requirements.
Right.
Okay.
So a few of the requirements in the standard include customer communication, which specify that you have to maintain customer feedback relating to products and services, which include customer complaints. And we have a few different options available for that collection of data.
Okay.
We have the customer feedback form, the customer complaint form, which is a little bit more in-depth and more complex, I guess, than the feedback form. And then the customer survey and feedback form, which offers a public version of a survey. So your external people can fill out a form, collect the data, and it gets automatically imported into your core account.
So this really makes it pretty simple to obtain, track, and measure feedback from.
Yeah, the auto forms are already set up to meet the requirement in as simple a format as we can think of. They've been tested through thousands of audits, so we can get better. Each form gets better as we go. Because it gets audited and then audited again and then audited again. And we, adapt and adjust to whatever the needs are. Plus, we get feedback from customers on what suits them. And sometimes we have to make the form editable or customizable to some degree to suit different companies.
Right.
All that stuff we had to learn, and we continue to learn. That things kind of iterate as we go. But the forms are just a godsend because it's pre-set up and you just learn how it works. Start filling it out, start using it, and you're automatically going to be collecting what the auditor is going to want to see without having to really think about it. Just use the form in your business, like customer complaints or whatever. Everybody gets 1 or 2 customer complaints, I suppose.
So part of the repeatability.
Yeah, there's built-in flexibility too. So we provide the information that is required for the standard. So that way you know for sure that that needs to be filled in for that specific record and that process. But there's flexibility built into our auto forms where a lot of the settings the customer can change that better suits their organization and their flow.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, example, who gets notified when something gets filled in? Well, that wouldn't be the same for every company. So that's part of what our consultant, our support team does, is they help the customer figure out, okay, how's this going to work? Who has to be involved? When are we going to notify whom? Who's supposed to fill in this part? Who's supposed to fill in that part? So that'll let you, set it up in a way that really suits the company. Not everything can be changed because some of it's just required.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you got to put something in, like a part number or whatever, I'm just guessing, but it's required. You got to put it in there. If you don't put it in there, it's not a complete record. So the auditor's going to put up a fuss.
Yep, and there could be a fine.
That's what they do. They put up.
Yes. And this can be used as evidence in an audit to be required.
For sure.
Yeah, that's right. So our design and development auto form it basically acts as our checklist, and it shows the evidence that, you're going through these different steps, identifying the inputs, the outputs, how you're validating that. And on that record, it shows evidence to an auditor that you actually did these things.
Exactly.
There's also some forms that we have specifically for our manufacturing type customers.
What might those be?
Those are the tool and equipment calibration forms, as well as the preventive maintenance auto forms. Those help track your assets, your tools, any equipment that you're using throughout your space to be able to calibrate and periodically maintain that equipment. The nice part about these forms is it does periodically remind you when things are coming due. So you have an expiration, and then the system will remind you with an email that, hey, this tool is coming up for maintenance. You might want to get on top of that before it expires.
You can have a document within there stored with that actual reminder telling you how to do it as well, correct?
That's right. Yep.
So you're not looking for information of, okay, I've got a certification or a maintenance that comes up. How do I do it? Where do I find that? That's in there as well. So it's very easy.
Yeah, the instructions are built in, the training is built in, and you also have the phone a friend option, which means you can call our support team or our consulting team and they'll help you.
That's awesome. So periodic reminders for calibration and maintenance. I mean, that's pretty cool. It's a lot easier than find it on your calendar and you get a reminder.
Yeah. One of the funny things is we will work with manufacturers who already have some kind of a tool or software set up to track these things, calibration in particular, because that's a pain in the pain in the nose, as our support manager Nadine would say.
That sounds like an Nadine comment.
But then, because we've focused on simplifying, a lot of people will say, gee, the software we bought last year is so complicated and we don't really know how to use it. And it's we're limping along here. Your forms are easier. Can we just move everything over there? And we can do that, right? We could move the information over from this system over to that. It's a few steps you have to go through.
That's right.
But they could switch. And then they're like, man, this is a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, we offer bulk import options. So if they do need to get started with their data in a previous system, they can likely download it to an Excel file, and we can take that and upload it into our system.
Or if you were keeping everything in Excel, a lot of people do that, just keeping track on their schedule or whatever. Okay, that information could be imported, and then it kind of helps you transition to be using the automated approach.
Right.
And you can kind of then abandon your spreadsheet.
Yep. And again, it's all kept right there. Information's right on how to do it, even where to send it out if you're going to calibrate or whatever, and you have to send it out for those processes.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. There's also a few other benefits, I guess, of using the auto forms.
What might those be?
So first, it's visible to all of your team members, right? So it's all in one place. You can kind of give that ownership up to the department or a specific person in charge of, say, calibration or preventive maintenance. And it offers the autonomy of that process. So you're not having to micromanage what's going on, having to share an Excel file between people. Makes it easier that way. And as long as you have internet access and a user account, you can access the data in Core.
That's awesome.
So we have some, I say, added features of user types. So your permissions, people have different levels of permission within the Core system, as well as security features that can be set up so that way you can either expand or limit who can enter data into certain forms or even who can access certain forms.
Well, I mean, that's a big issue because if I just did a podcast where we talk about documentation moving forward, you can't just have it accessible to everybody that can change it. You might want them to be able to read it, but not necessarily change it.
Yeah.
So having those permissions is really important, and Core will do that for you.
Exactly, yes.
It's part of that customization, to suit the way they do what they do.
This ends part 1 of our podcast on the Core Compliance Platform and ISO standards. Please tune in next week when we'll be diving deeper into Core and how it handles notifications, reports, graphs and charts of real-time data, dashboards, document and record control, and so much more. We'd like to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today, and we hope it's been informative for you. If you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions and how it can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, customized training, or the Core Compliance Platform, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. You can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform, please be sure to do so. That way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day, everyone.